Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a very special episode of the Drachmas and Denarii podcast. As always, I'm your host, Sam, joined today by my two co-hosts, Adrian and Kyle. In today's episode, we're going to be having a very interesting discussion looking at my consignment of ancient Byzantine coins to the coin auction house Numismatica Ars Classica. I've got about 145 lots being sold, and what we're going to do today is kind of take an overview of the sale, take a holistic view of what's going on, the different categories, what's being presented, and then maybe take a deep dive into 5 to 10 of the more special lots that are being sold here. So I'm looking forward to it. I've got a lot of interesting stuff in this sale. I think we're going to have a very educational episode too for people who maybe aren't always exposed to late Byzantine, as I know it's a more niche field. Well, Kyle, Adrian, thank you for joining me. I hope you guys are doing well.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, so I guess maybe the best way we can start is just kind of talking about the collection and why I'm selling. I feel like that would maybe be a good ground to cover in the beginning. So what you kind of see here, like I said, it's going to be about 145 coins that cover the late Byzantine Empire. So that's about 1204 until 1453, roughly. And within that, I've collected coins from the state of Nicaea, the state of Thessaloniki, the Latin Empire, Trebizond, and then the later Palaeologan or restored Byzantine Empire. And what you kind of see in the collection, it's a variety of metals as well. We've got bronze coinage, of course, silver, some rare types, and some gold as well. So it's kind of got the trifecta. It's not necessarily complete, but nor is it supposed to be. I think with late Byzantine, I mean, realistically, you would have thousands of types perhaps in total. But what I've kind of got offered here is a selection of choice pieces and a number of interesting coins that haven't come to market for decades, if ever. So some of the coins are unique that haven't been seen before, and others are known types, but perhaps the first in private hands. So I think it's going to be for the late Byzantine collector and people who want to get interested in this field, a very interesting consignment, a very interesting sale, because it sort of affords you the chance to get coins you couldn't normally otherwise collect. And yeah, I guess the amount of time it took for me to put this together was probably around, um, I would guess maybe like 6 years roughly, maybe a little bit longer, a little bit shorter. I'd have to kind of go back and see when I really started collecting full time in this area. But it's been quite the journey for me, very educational. I think late Byzantine coinage is one of those fields to where when you really want to study this and dive into it, you actually have to buy all the literature and do extensive reading to make sure you actually understand the coinage because it's so crude and to be frank, in a lot of areas, so little is known about this that it actually becomes quite a challenge to collect. But I found that actually very rewarding. I found that it was very enjoyable to actually sort of have that deep dive in the literature and actually be able to find new coin types that are unpublished and present those. So yeah, it's been a very enjoyable experience for me. And then also, I mean, I've kind of mentioned this in the podcast a few times before, but I am working on a new reference series for late Byzantine coins. And this consignment, sort of getting everything cataloged that I owned, getting it sorted, and then sort of integrating that into a system is actually what started that project about a year and a half ago to make that sort of a more serious endeavor, excuse me. So yeah, it's been very interesting. I reached out to NAC. There were some sale delays, so this actually I think we talked about it in the podcast before as well. Should have come out last year at this time. So there was actually a whole full year of delay from when the agreed upon sale date was to when it finally came about. But whatever, it's irritating, but I'm glad to see it finally come to sale, and it's going to be very interesting. I've actually done all the cataloging myself for this portion, so everything you see here, all the write-ups are done by me, and I kind of insisted upon that just because, like I mentioned, the late Byzantine field is very niche, and I just kind of figured that who would know the coins better than me, not to be arrogant in that sense, but just um, I felt like perhaps an average cataloger wouldn't have necessarily the depth to catalog everything that maybe a dedicated collector would. So I was very happy that NAC gave me the flexibility to actually catalog the coins myself because some auction houses out there actually weren't a fan of that and didn't approve. So I was very happy about that, and I'm happy to see the final project put together now and offered for public sale. I think it's going to be very exciting.
I've known you, Sam, for a good few years now, and I remember when I first got to know you, I in the back of my mind, I dismissively categorized you as a weird, like bronze, like Byzantine collector. But
Which I still
I
am.
but I've gotten to know and I've gotten to learn that this collection represents a breadth of knowledge that I think a few collectors manage to assemble even after decades of collecting. And you say this has been 6 years in the making?
Roughly, I think that's when I started. Um,
Yeah.
I didn't go kind of full steam with like Byzantine at the very beginning of that, but yeah, roughly about that time frame. Yeah, I mean, part of that was too just sort of the idea of, I think, the sort of misidentification of coins. That's a very big problem with like Byzantine, and you see it a lot of times with auction houses and retail stores, to where I think that this is one area where you can't really just sort of list buy coins, as in, I don't know, certain fields, maybe you can just have a reference number and sort of checklist off what you buy. But I think there's actually so many errors in what gets presented with like Byzantine coins that you actually can't even really trust auction houses and what they write. But the flip side of that is that if you do have the knowledge, you can sometimes get a good deal to where you buy a coin that was misidentified and you get the proper attribution. And that was also why I insisted on the cataloging myself, just to make sure that everything would have the correct attribution and to make sure that it was actually presented as the type it is.
And that's sort of also the because obviously I'm not I'm not in this space, so I can't really uh, uh, take part in the either the historical or the numismatic analysis. But what I have gotten a lot of what has made me very interested are these group lot finds that you're able to find these weird coins that haven't sold for decades that you're able to pick up for just a few dollars sometimes.
Yeah, it's been very
Um,
nice. One good example of that is just sort of finding a coin that was misidentified. Let me see if I can get this to work here. Hold on. My computer screen is kind of freezing. Uh, Here we go. Okay. So lot 1204, if you look at this one, this is actually an example of that. So this is, we'll go more into it later, I think, as we kind of go chronologically throughout the different empires and rulers of the sale that are being presented here. But this is actually a coronation issue of John III Vatatzes. It's a very rare silver coin. And as far as I'm aware, I think this might be the only one in private hands, um, at least the only one to my knowledge. And at the very least, it hasn't been offered at retail or auction for at least about 2 decades now. So despite the obvious condition issues, this is a coin that pretty much, if you want to own the type, this might be your only shot at doing so. And what makes it so special also is the legend that identifies. You see here the emperor on the reverse. He's being crowned by Christ. This actually mentions a very specific type of Christ, and that's Christ Chalcites, or Christ of the Chalt Gate. So we kind of see a very interesting mention of a certain Christ as seen in a certain icon. And astute listeners will recall that back to the iconoclastic era, excuse me, that the Chalt Gate was actually one of the controversies that occurred when a Byzantine emperor removed the icon from that gate. And when the iconophiles won, they restored the gate. There's actually a lot of significance behind this specific rendition of Christ from that specific icon that heralds the idea of the Byzantine emperor as a defender of orthodoxy and the defender of Christianity. So we see a very interesting type with an unusual depiction of Christ that harkens back to the coronation of John in a very fine style. And like I said, despite the issues, it's sort of one of those coins that this might be the only one in private hands. And to go back to where we started, what we discussed earlier, that this was actually a misidentified coin in a group lot that I found. It was sold
Wow.
alongside, I think it was some Andronicus the First AR coins. And I think to the untrained eye, perhaps they might look kind of similar. You just sort of got generic Byzantine figures crowned by a holy figure, the emperor crowned by a holy figure. But I was able to spot out that this was actually the aforementioned type of John III's coronation issue. So things like that that have just been a lot of fun, to where I think this is one of those eras, one of those fields to where I think if you actually take the time to learn the scholarship, it'll pay off in dividends.
Is this coin in like Dumbarton Oaks, or is it in any of the museum
Yes,
collections?
so this one is actually published. If you look here, here's the references for that. You've got Sear 2075, LBC 209, and Dumbarton Oaks 21. So this is actually one example of a coin that's well known, but still very scarce. So it's in the literature, it is discussed, but it just hasn't been on the market yet for private collectors. But if you go to the previous slide, just for example, this is a coin type that is actually the inverse, a coin that's pretty much completely unknown. From the same ruler, a later issue, so not a coronation piece, but it's very hard to date these. But at some point later in his reign, we've got a unique unpublished issue. And so there's one article, there's one other piece that's somewhat comparable from Simon Bendall. Of course, he is recently deceased, but he was the sort of premier Byzantinist, late Byzantinist, that was doing a lot of research in the numismatic world and has published a lot of unique coins and interesting pieces. And so the only other example of the type is actually from his collection that was sold at C&G at a Triton sale. But this is the second known example with a unique overstrike of a hitherto unknown coin. So it's kind of got a second known example overstruck on top of a unique coin. And of course, if anyone's interested, the description goes more into the explanation of what's going on here, but that's kind of an example of another coin that was actually sold as an Andronicus I Guidon AR coin from Trebizond. But if you kind of are familiar with the coins, you'll immediately understand that that's a false attribution. And then sort of having that knowledge and sort of understanding some of the literature helps you actually pick out those coins, identify them, and then get the correct attribution. But yeah, that's just kind of about the references. I did take great care to actually include all of those in the descriptions. I think it's quite helpful. So what I followed was Sear, the late Byzantine coin catalog, Dumbarton Oaks for the Nicaean issues, and then also for some of the Palaeologan. We've got those specific references, but we can go into that later too. But yeah, I think maybe one good way to kind of go through this is look at the different empires, perhaps in chronological order, and just kind of show how the sale is set up. So kind of my idea behind it was I didn't just want a normal auction, a normal presentation of coins, but for the first coin listing of each new empire, each new ruler, I've actually got a unique write-up written there that kind of explains the history of the figure. I'll go ahead and just show the first three here to kind of give you a sense of what's going on, but this is the first coin presented in my consignment from the Latin Empire. And so what I've done is actually kind of gone through and given this one's a rather lengthy one, but just a write-up that kind of explains the historical context of these coins and how you can kind of imagine the situations in which they were minted. And this is very interesting, just kind of talking about that. This might be known to our listeners, but if you look at the Byzantine historian Nicaea Choniates, he writes about the fall of Constantinople in 1204 to the Crusaders. And part of what he does too is list out the many different statues from antiquity that were collected in Constantinople by Constantine and different emperors. They sort of looted the empire, for lack of a better word, took all the well-known art pieces and brought them to this new city, this new capital. And they actually survived there more or less untouched for about a millennium. But then with the Fourth Crusade and the sack, many of the Crusaders actually melted down all these bronze and precious metal statues to mint coinage. So you get some very, very poignant writing from Choniates that sort of discusses all these beautiful and well-known statues, and then to see more or less what, had they survived, would have been the greatest art pieces from antiquity that were minted down into the most crude coins that are known to collectors. So you get a lot of irony too in some of this, but some very interesting historical connections. But like I mentioned, the sale is sort of set up to have a description that sort of introduces and discusses all the coins from a certain empire and series. So you go to the next one, this will now be Nicaea. You get a similar thing that discusses the life and times of Theodore I. And you go to his next ruler, John, you get a very similar idea, a write-up that sort of discusses and explains him as a figure. And that goes on for each new empire and each new ruler. So the whole consignment too, the sale is kind of seen, in my opinion, as not only just an offering of some pretty interesting and unique coins, but also sort of a springboard for perhaps a new collector to where if you just look through each lot in the sale, you'd actually get a decent understanding of the history of the Byzantine Empire, the late one, and sort of understand the different rulers, what they did and their actions, and the impact of those, and then also how the coins relate. But yeah, that was just kind of what I thought for the sale. It was also fun for me just to kind of have that aspect going on, just to sort of show and highlight the context of some of these coins. But we can go through some highlights. So here are some coins that maybe to the untrained eye look rather mundane, rather boring from the Latin Empire, but you actually get some very interesting issues that are unpublished for the most part. So here we see a very rare Latin type. This is the first time that this type has actually been presented at auction. And even though it's rather unassuming, it's got a very charming style, very squat figures, and a little bit crude, but it's just a rare type that you don't see very often. It's unpublished in the main reference works, so that would be Dumbarton Oaks and late Byzantine coinage. I included Seer just because people tend to use him, but I think honestly for late Byzantine, he misses so many types. He has such little detail. It's actually not really worth following him to a great degree. But anyway, a newer reference work, CLBC, they actually do have this type recorded. So it's not now unpublished, but still published and very rare. So a type very not often seen at auction. So
What's
I think
what's CLBC? I'm not unfamiliar with that as a reference work. Can you give me some more
yes,
on
that's
that?
it's kind of an interesting piece. I've actually got it next to me here. It's the catalog of late Byzantine coins by Valentin Marchev and Robert Bafter. Um, and the way this worked was, I think it was a German and a Bulgarian who sort of joined together to write a new reference work covering the Byzantine Empire from pretty much 1081 to 1204, and then covering the Latin Empire and the Thessalonican Empire afterwards. But it's sort of an interesting piece or interesting work. It was privately published, I think about 2014. Um, and it's just got an unusual flavor, unusual feel to it. It has been helpful in highlighting certain types that were hitherto unknown to me that were then featured in the catalog, but at the same time, they don't even have a bibliography. They don't mention any of the sources they use. They don't use any footnotes or anything like that. So without any scholarly notation, it's kind of hard to take the work seriously and the theories it presents. And it makes a lot of assumptions. I think sort of the aspect of it being privately published does sort of reflect across that to where I think, like I said, not to speak ill of the work. I think it does present a lot of new types, but I think the scholarly theories I wouldn't put too much weight in. But the catalog itself is decent in highlighting new types that maybe in the last 10 years have come to market.
I
It's a
look
really
at
nice.
the. Oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I look at the coin and I collect Roman coins, so obviously I'm familiar with I mean like legend varieties or perhaps I mean like left-facing varieties and so forth. But is this a very anomalous type? Is this a coin that just like flies at you and tells you that it's very rare and special, or what makes
So
this
I would
a
say
rare
no.
variety?
So what makes it so interesting is, I think, in a certain sense, you kind of see this composition added up together. There's certain different elements of regalia put together is unique combined with the obverse. But what makes this so interesting is the style of the piece is actually kind of different from what you see in a lot of the Latin types. So it would kind of seem to me that perhaps the mint of where this was made or the cellator who cut the dies would be something separate from the actual main mints that produce the rest of the coinage. But it's an interesting piece in the fact that the style is so different from what you normally see. I think if we go back out to some of the other Latin coins that perhaps aren't unique or aren't rare, you can perhaps kind of see that the style is less charming per se, perhaps. I think what you see here is sort of maybe a more sterile rendition of the emperor and the coin designs, whereas what you kind of have going on in this piece, you sort of have larger eyes, larger dots of the eyes, a larger nose, sort of a very crude beard. Just sort of the details that are on this coin are just very crudely executed, which sort of stands out. That and the type being unique sort of help to catch the eye, perhaps. But I think if you weren't really seriously involved in collecting this area, it wouldn't stand out at you in a group lot per se. But I think if you collect long enough, you can perhaps catch this and realize it might be something unique and of interest.
You've obviously like highlighted the clothing in very um in very very detailed in a very detailed way. Does that make any difference when you look at different types in the catalog? Are they cataloged by the clothing the emperor wears, or how does that
Yeah,
work?
so that kind of depends on who you ask, I suppose. I think that a lot of the reference works up to date actually really haven't given much care to that. It's sort of for a general type might mention the clothing they have, but variants aren't really considered or recorded. And then even some serious differences in clothing and regalia are sort of brushed aside and not even addressed. So it's kind of up for debate, I suppose. Part of what I want to achieve with my new work, the one that I mentioned, the reference work that I'm writing, is actually giving a more serious study to this regalia and actually looking at the different variants, changes over time, things like that. But I think in the current literature, maybe superficially it is treated, but that in perhaps what you might imagine with, let's say, like third century Antoniniani, you're going to study all the different bust types, every variation
Oh
from
yeah.
different mints, sort them chronologically, things of that nature. And that really hasn't been done with Byzantium. They get just the most basic level of treatment of saying the regalia that's shown is this piece of regalia, and not this entirely separate other piece. But sometimes even that fails to hold up. So it just depends, I think. So I feel like short answer, no, it's not treated that well. But long answer, hopefully soon it will be.
That's a very interesting analogy, though, because obviously I mean, bus types for third century coinage is immensely important when cataloging those coins.
Hmm. Yeah, so kind of what I want to do also is hopefully bring some of that towards like Byzantine and help it to gain some academic respect, I think, as well. Where I feel like it really hasn't gotten a lot of love in comparison to Greek and Roman. So maybe this sale will help, and hopefully the reference work will too. But anyway, here's another piece like that. I'm not going to spend too much time on the Latin Empire because, to be honest, I think it's some of the worst coinage of the whole period. But one more thing to highlight is actually a lot of these pieces do have a provenance that goes back very far. So for a lot of late Byzantine coins, you're not going to find very much provenance at all, which is sad to say. But a lot of the earlier catalogs, you might imagine, like the Ars Classica and things of that nature, they were more focused on Greek and Roman. And if Byzantine ever made it into the sales, it typically usually was the early Byzantine in quite nice shape. Late Byzantine never really got plated or even sold. So it's very hard to find late Byzantine coins with provenance. But a lot of these actually, when I bought them, came with older catalogs and tickets of sales. You'll see a lot of the coins, especially in the Latin Empire, actually do have a provenance back to the 70s or 80s, which is actually very hard to find. That's one more thing of note that's kind of interesting to see here. But yeah, I say next we can go into Nicaea, just because that's a more interesting period. We can kind of open up some of the highlights here. We've already discussed two of those coins, but we can give them a further look. I'll just open up a few different lots here that I think are worth our attention. So first of all, this is the section for Theodore Lascaris. He was the first emperor in Nicaea, and sort of after the sack, he flees to Anatolia and sort of starts an empire in exile, and eventually has himself crowned as the new Byzantine emperor, and founding or restoring the empire in that area. And this is his AR trachea, one of the issues he has. It's, I would say, pretty much an exceptional style and strike. It's got great details, great toning, very pleasant in hand. Um, and the reverse especially is very lovely. The portrait here of the emperor and the saint, his namesake saint, Saint Theodore, and the emperor Theodore standing together, sort of a symbol that the new empire will stand and that they have heavenly protection for this new enterprise. But it's a very nice coin. Um, yeah, like I mentioned too, with the first emperor and first new empire, for those coin types, there's going to be a lengthy write-up. I'm not going to read everything out here. I think that would take too long, but the write-ups are, I think, in my opinion, quite well written and with tasteful irony and humor, should make for a good read. So if anyone's interested, I think I would well recommend going and seeing all that.
Outstanding background on the coin. I mean, it just adds to the story of it, right? It's provenance and the background of the history of it. The style is especially on the reverse is outstanding.
Mm.
A really bold strike.
Yeah, with some intact legends too, which are often hard to find as well.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I think especially for late Byzantine, just because let's say you're selling a coin of Brutus or Caesar. I mean, people still include write-ups for those, but perhaps it's more unnecessary, as in the stories are quite well known. But I think with late Byzantine, it's actually not. So I kind of thought part of that too was by sort of adding those stories and connecting the history back to the coinage, it makes for a more full picture. You can perhaps better appreciate the pieces themselves.
Absolutely. People buy the history they know, and that's, a big driver in the ancient coin market. So the more information you can give, the better. And Byzantine history is a very uncovered subject when it comes to that kind of thing. So it's
Yeah,
awesome.
indeed. This one is also a great coin. This is from the successor of Theodore the First Lascaris. This is John the Third Vatatzes, and it's an unusually nice hyperpyron. It's a gold coin, as you can see, in pretty exceptional shape. The reverse here, especially, again, is in very nice condition. It's got an almost perfect strike, nearly full legends. I think it's very hard to find this type, this series of coinage in this nice of a shape.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's a great
What was
piece,
what
and
was the gold content at this point? Was it like 70%?
yeah, it was definitely reduced. I think it depends actually on the types. There's a lot of controversy where we actually have some contemporary sources from Italian merchants who claim that certain sigla markings on the obverse of the coin, that those actually correspond to purity. But so far, it seems like we can't actually substantiate that. And it seems like the purity is kind of all over the place. But I think anywhere from about like 17 to 14 carats of gold is about standard. Sometimes more. This is an especially nice issue. I wouldn't be surprised. I didn't do any testing, so I can't confirm exactly what the purity is, but it seems to be in the higher end of that spectrum. But during this time, for sure, they were debased. And then over the history of the empire, you see more and more debasing going on. But yeah, it's a very nice coin and just a lovely piece here. And these we kind of already looked at, but like I mentioned, this is the second known coin type overstruck on a unique coin, a very interesting piece. You can kind of see some of that going on here in the obverse, where to the right side you can kind of see the legend reading XC, or part of the legend for Christ. And the left side there actually reads, it's got the abbreviation for the Mother of God. So you kind of have a split here where the left side of the obverse shows the Theotokos, the Mother of God, and the right side actually shows Christ. So it's a very interesting piece, and that right side is actually unknown in AR for this period with that the marking here. You see the crescent moon sigla. It's actually an unknown type in silver. So it's a very interesting coin. And in that you have this second known coin type overstruck in a unique undertype. Yeah, very interesting coin. Again, to the write-up, kind of discussing the full context of this coin and sort of what's going on, and references to the literature and all that. And then next, yeah, we already looked at this, the coronation issue, but it's a very nice piece, very fine style. Although it is damaged, like we mentioned, it's kind of if you want to have this type, this might be your only shot at doing so. Just in light of the issues and damage, a very beautiful piece. And then to a type we haven't discussed yet, this is a silver type of John III Vatatzes, still the same emperor continued. It's not unique, but for late Byzantine, almost all silver coins are going to be rare, no matter what issue they are. So even though this isn't unique or unpublished, it is a very rare issue. Um, and the obverse especially, I mean, this coin is suffering from a lot of damage. You can kind of see the ragged flan, and it's also got a double strike here, where you've got sort of around 12 o'clock the portrait of Christ upstanding, and then around 1 to 2 o'clock you can see him again, sort of off center, the previous strike. But even in spite of all those issues, I think the portrait here of Christ is very refreshing, very elegant. You can see particular attention has been given to his hair, to his facial expressions. He's got just a very elegant disposition here, and a lot of time has been spent engraving that die. So I think this is one of my favorites from the collection, actually. Even though it's not the rarest or the most valuable, I think the style here is actually quite exceptional. And if you look past all the issues, I think it's one to be very much appreciated.
I remember you getting this coin.
Yeah, this is
Uh,
a group lot find again.
yeah, and if I recall correctly, you also managed to clean it. It didn't look like this coming from the group lot. Or am
No.
I
Yeah,
misremembering?
no. This one, there's actually a better example. We'll go into that later. It was one of the Palaeologan coins. But this
Oh,
is again like that. Yeah, I would agree to where I mean a lot of these just sort of coins that aren't cared about, just tossed around. People see a damaged coin with a ragged flan, it must be worthless, right? It just kind of gets group lotted and cast to the bottom of coin cabinets. But I kind of picked that and realized what it was. So yeah, I gave this one some nice attention. It's got some nice iridescent blue toning as well. The photograph doesn't quite capture it, but in hand it has got like a nice glossy blue color to it. But yeah, it's certainly an interesting coin type, and like I said, not the most rare, but I quite like these dies. And then
I
last but
like
not
the
least, oh,
oh,
sorry,
never mind.
didn't mean to cut you off. We'll go back.
The other coins that we've looked at so far, the emperor is shown with a sort of like a rectangular, or what would you call it? Grid sort of tunic with like squares on. But
Here
this
towards the
one,
bottom, the
yeah, yeah, it
the
looked like
Loros here,
like, yeah,
yeah,
water
like almost
drops
like
or
water
something.
drops
Yeah,
and dots. Yeah, it's an especially fine rendition of that. Yeah, you are right. It's a less common Loros from what you see. And I think from what I can tell, it's pretty much only featured on silver coins, actually. In the bronze coins, you almost rarely ever see that, but it comes across on some silver coins, and most especially in the reign of John III Vatatzes. But you are right, that is a rare edition of that sort of regalia, of that piece of attire. I'd say also a finer one at that.
very cool.
Yeah, definitely. And then this lot and the following lot, I actually ended up acquiring two pieces of the same unpublished coin type of John III Vatatzes. So this is a silver issue where you've got the emperor being crowned by Christ on the obverse, and then you've got the Theotokos, the Mother of God, seated on a throne holding the infant Christ. You can kind of make out his portrait here if you look closely. A squat, sort of chubby face, but it's still there. And you might be wondering, I think this is the kind of coin to where if you just had the two examples that I am selling here, um, on the attribution of style alone, on the basis of style alone, you could probably attribute the coin to John III Vatatzes. But I actually am aware of one more example where the legends are still intact. So that's how I was able to actually confirm this as being John III Vatatzes. But it's again a very interesting coin type that, um, besides the other, the third known example that was sold misidentified a couple of years back, this is really the first chance to buy this coin type at auction. So it's a very interesting coin piece, not in the best condition, but again, if you want to have this type, uh, probably your only option. But yeah, very interesting and again, kind of unpublished in the standard references. Yeah, I'm not going to go into the bronze coinage too much unless it's something of exceptional rarity or style, just for the sake of time here. But there's plenty of interesting stuff going on. And so now we've kind of left the Nicaean Empire, and we're going to go to their rivals. So Nicaea was based in Anatolia in the city of Nicaea, in modern day Turkey, and they claim to be the successors of Rome after the sack of 1204. But you actually had a rival power base, a group of Byzantine sort of nobles and well-to-do individuals who actually, instead of fleeing east, fled west, and they established the rival empire of Thessaloniki. So this is sort of the rival coinage and the rival emperors across the sea here. And so again, like I mentioned, for all of these emperors, I've given a nice write-up kind of introducing the new empire and the new ruler, and sort of explaining the situation, what's going on. Um, and this emperor was actually very unfortunate. Up until the year 1230, he actually appeared to be winning the sweepstakes for who would actually become the true successor to Byzantium. In the end, Nicaea succeeds, and the Palaeologans take over that empire and actually sort of come back to Constantinople. And the rest of the history, I'm sure we all know, up to the 1453 sack. And Thessaloniki actually loses that, and they get absorbed by Nicaea. But they were actually doing better. They had more military victories and seemingly a better organized governmental structure until in the year 1230, the emperor was actually captured by the Bulgarians in battle and blinded, and that sort of cast away their hopes for success. But this is a coin before that happened, a rare silver issue of Theodore I Dukas. And we can kind of see here if we zoom in on the obverse, oops, hold on. You can see the emperor is actually being presented the model city of Thessaloniki by the Saint Demetrius. So this is kind of a message that the saint himself is giving Theodore rule of the city and blessing him of being the emperor. It also kind of conveys a message that the emperor and the saint together will actually protect the people in the city. So I think that's one fun aspect of late Byzantine coinage, getting to see those model cities. It's not something you get to see too often.
That's really cool.
But yeah, definitely a fun issue. And then here's one that's one of my favorites too. It's not the rarest issue, but I think um, I'd be free to say it's actually the finest known. I spent some time actually at Dumbarton Oaks a couple of weeks ago and got to see all their bronzes. And from what I've seen, comparing it to those in hand and some of the coin archives and AC search examples, I think this actually has um, probably the best preserved coin of this example is what this is. Just with the full legends we see here, an elegant composition. Although you've got a bit of a weak strike here in the center, still you've got a lot of wonderful details and a very fully engraved die, or fully struck, I should say. Yeah, with legends like that, you often don't see the full thing. And then again, here's another example of perhaps not the most rare issue that's out there, but it's struck in a very elegant style. We can see here if I zoom in, you've got some wonderful portraiture. So that's actually one of the areas that usually goes away first. If you have a poorly struck coin, the faces are often marred or obscured. But here we can actually see a wonderful depiction of the emperor bearded with a mustache, and then the sort of baby-faced Saint Michael next to him. We can see sort of the cheeks and the chin, but just a very wonderful and charming coin that you almost never see in this nice of a condition.
How big of a coin is this?
I want to say this is going to be about like 30 millimeters. I'd have to check. Yeah, okay,
So pretty good size.
got it spot on, 30. Yeah, they're pretty decently sized, and these are actually also pretty heavy for the era. I think a lot of the bronze coinage can be much lighter, around 1 to 2 grams perhaps, but this is a very heavy piece. And a lot of what we see too in the coinage of Theodore the First Lascaris in Epirus and Thessaloniki, he actually goes kind of out of his way to have the finest dies engraved, and also to have sort of heavier coins struck in comparison with his rivals in Nicaea. So I think this emperor actually took great care in presenting what we might call quality pieces of coinage that sort of use this as a vehicle of his propaganda to sort of claim I'm the true emperor. Look, I'm minting the best coinage in this era, the finest coinage, and some of the heaviest too. So it's very interesting here, this piece, and yeah, hefty in hand and
I love
quite impressive.
I love the cherubic face of did you say it was Saint Michael?
Saint Michael, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And is he winged, and is that
yeah,
wings
exactly. He's
on
winged. He's
there?
got a winged in the reverse, and then he's wearing the garb of the emperor here. If you look, he's got the lauros on,
That's right.
which actually isn't too uncommon. If you look at Hagia Sophia and many of the mosaics, this angels are actually often presented in the guise of the emperor, which is also interesting.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's a fun type for sure. And then kind of going on, we've got his successor, Manuel, some of his coinage, and then going on to John Dukas. He's a very fun ruler. Um, so from what we can tell from most of the Byzantine emperors, it seems that they would actually introduce one coin design per year on the throne. So you would have gold excluded unless you count the sigla, at which point you might make a similar argument. But it would seem to be that, especially for bronze and then silver too, a lot of the emperors were issuing one unique coin type per year and then changing that out. And John Dukas serves as a great exception in this era, to where I think the other emperors, they might have ruled 10 years, and we know 10 bronze coins from them. He rules 5 years, and there's about 40 types that are known. And so it's very unclear
Wow.
as to why he would mint so many coin types. And some of the prevailing theories indicate that perhaps traders active in the Balkans after his death continued to mint and innovate new types in his name. But that's very speculative, and there's not really any hard proof for it. So it's kind of a great mystery of Byzantine numismatics of why this is the case. But anyway, it's for the collector to enjoy that we have this many types known from him. And he's also got a very distinct style, and he's also one of the only figures in the period that are depicted beardless. Most of the other emperors are actually shown with a beard, but he isn't. And you can also just kind of see that over time in Byzantium, the quality of the coins does seem to decrease, especially in Thessaloniki. If we just compare these two, it's not the best comparison exactly, because you're crossing the metal types now. But if you look that this coin was probably minted in the late 1220s time period, and we see here the emperor and a saint presenting a model city. You can go fast forward about 20 years later, and you've got the same depiction more or less on the reverse here. We can kind of see the stark difference in quality in the die engraving, to where you've also got an emperor, you've got a model city here and a saint, but this coin is quite wretched, very small. I don't know the exact weight. I would guess below 1 gram, or 1.5, 1.05 grams. But still, we can kind of see here just the vast differences you might find in style and quality between one emperor and the next. But that's not to say all of John's coins are that bad. Even though he's got a very unique style, it's very easy to spot. A lot of them are actually decently well engraved, all things considered. And here's a wonderful example of a beautiful portrait from him. Very, very goofy looking in a certain sense, where you've got the oversized facial features and then the lack of a beard again. But this is actually a quite decently well preserved coin from his reign. And then here again, this is actually there's some controversy too about his coinage, where you have different sizes, where seemingly there were certain classes of coins where, if we look here and compare, let me find a good example just to throw up on the screen. You can see here, this is actually going to be roughly the same coin issue, but struck in a vastly different die size. We can see here that the size of the figures, the millimeter height of them, is actually quite different between these two dies, as well as a level of detail presented. And that's another great mystery of why certain coins are minted in certain modules per se. But this is kind of an interesting example of that, where you've got just two different coins that have sort of vastly different engraving capabilities and sizes. But yeah, he's a very interesting ruler, lots of fun types. This is another interesting type that you don't see too often. This is actually the emperor. It's in a little bit rough shape. You can see here he's winged, actually. He's got a wing to either side of him, so he's kind of presented in the guise of a winged figure, which is very unusual and very interesting. You see it more on the later Palaeologans, but for this early coinage, it's quite unusual. And so here's a wonderful type. Let me open some of these up just to take a quick look at before we go on later into the Palaeologans. But this is one of my favorite coins of the whole series. I actually bought this from Harlan J. Burke at, I want to say it was NY Inc. 2022 or 2023. But a very wonderful coin where you've got some beautifully preserved busts here, and then also a full legend. You kind of see the bust of the emperor here and the bust of St. Demetrius, in between a staff on the top of which lies the fleur-de-lis. But just an interesting coin, remarkable for the style, the die, and the strike. And then this one is actually quite interesting. This is a totally unique coin for the emperor, hitherto unknown. And so you might be wondering that you look at a coin like this, you probably can't make too much detail out. How could I know it's unique? Well, you can actually look, if I go back to the previous coin, it's actually probably a good comparison here. The saint is actually unbearded. If we zoom into his portrait, you can see here he's got a clean chin and no beard. And if we zoom in on this coin, you can actually see the saintly figure not only has a conspicuously large afro, but also a forked pointed beard. And that lets us know this is actually Saint Theodore and not Saint Demetrius. And so that's kind of a key indicator of this being a new type, as well as the staff we see here in the middle. The known types actually have different decorations on the staff and a different top. So kind of in combining the details of recognizing the staff part and then also the saint figure, we can realize this is actually a unique and unpublished coin type of John. So it's kind of in my opinion, as sort of a nerdy collector, one of the highlights of the collection. Even though it doesn't look the best, it's perhaps not the most visually appealing, it is quite the interesting coin.
I'm gonna be honest, I didn't even see the saint to the right there.
Yeah.
I thought it was just an emperor holding a staff.
Nice. Yeah, I think just the more exposure you have, the more you can pick up those kind of details. But yeah, you are right. It's like I said, not the most visually appealing coin, but a very interesting one for the numismatist. And just like I mentioned earlier with John, I think roughly minting 40 types in 5 years. Well, it's just another new type to add on to that. But yeah, very interesting coin and pretty fun. And then here's another highlight. This is actually a unique despot, um, Michael II of Epirus, and this is one of the few coins that we can more or less date to a specific year, actually. And it's tied to the expansion of the Nicaean state. I kind of mentioned earlier the sweepstakes. You have the rival states of Thessaloniki and Nicaea, and Nicaea actually ends up winning and eventually absorbing Thessaloniki. This is kind of one of those events to where the ruler Michael II tries to proclaim himself as emperor, and then his rival John III Vatatzes, who we looked at earlier with the coronation coin in different pieces, he actually invades his lands and forces Michael to take a step down in the imperial rankings and become a despot. Um, and upon becoming despot, John actually marries off his daughter to Michael. And then seemingly this coin itself is actually connected to the event to where we see very unusually all the other coins we've seen so far, if you have an emperor being blessed or crowned, it's always by a holy figure. This is one of the very few exceptions to where we actually have the despot Michael here being crowned by the Emperor John III Vatatzes. So it's a very interesting piece in that it's an assertion of the Nicaean right of sort of regional hegemony over Epirus. It's a little bit unclear if this was minted in duress. You could perhaps phrase it that John sort of forced Michael to actually mint this, sort of commemorate his downgrading perhaps of what might have been imperial pretensions into that of being a despot, or perhaps Michael was happy with the arrangement. He got to marry the emperor's daughter. So it's a very interesting piece and sort of I think a classic for the late Byzantine collector that if you're going to be in this era, this is one of those key desirable types that you want to have.
And know for sure if it was minted in Epirus, or is there potential that it was minted in Nicaea and used as
I don't think so. I think
propaganda?
stylistically it was most likely minted in Epirus, which would kind of make sense. So it would see local circulation, um, maybe then affect those people who are most likely to cause issues or stir up trouble. But one more thing I didn't point out, if you actually look, very interesting, the figure here of Michael, he's holding the palm wreath being crowned. If you look at his crown, this is actually one of the very few visual representations we have of this. The despots actually wore a different crown than the imperial stemma, the imperial crown itself. So this example is a little bit of damage to where you can't quite see it, but if we open up a previous coin, you can see here the emperor sort of depicted by what looks like almost a straight line of dots with the pendilia coming off the sides. If we look here, he's actually got a very round domed cap, and that's actually a rare depiction of the despot's crown that we know from certain contemporary sources. So it's just a very interesting piece that kind of shows the different contemporary attire of different levels of court ranking beyond everything else I said, but just a very interesting aspect. Yeah, I think that's one of the favorite coins of mine. Published, but very rare. I think there's only 5 known in private hands, roughly, or so. So it's a very interesting piece. And so leaving that, we're going to be going into the Palaeologan coins. So this is then Michael VIII. He's the founder of this dynasty. Up until him, it was the Lascarid family who ruled. So we saw that there was Theodore I, who then adopts John III, who has his son Theodore II, who has a son John IV. And then when John IV is about 10 years old, Michael actually takes over his regency council, then blinds the young child and exiles him and takes over the empire for himself. And so kind of establishes the break between the Nicaean Empire and then the Palaeologan Empire. Um, and he's a very controversial figure. And I've written some of that up. Like I mentioned, each ruler is going to have an interesting write-up talking about what they did and sort of their life. And so Michael actually gets more attention than most just because he's such a controversial figure. And I believe, I could be wrong on this, but from my research, I think he's the only figure in the history of humanity to have died both in excommunication from the Latin Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church. So he kind of holds an ignominious record in that sense. He's a very controversial figure, but he did a lot of good,
Quite
a lot of bad as well. I think he's kind of the definition of maybe a cutthroat adventurer who will do whatever it takes to stay in power. But incidents like the Sicilian Vespers sort of show a very developed Byzantine geopolitical understanding of things, and they're meddling in affairs across the globe. So he's a very interesting figure, definitely very intelligent, but unscrupulous and without morals, it would seem. But sometimes perhaps it's what you want in a ruler in certain situations and times. So it's easy to condemn, but also, yeah, some of his antics might have been very beneficial as well. But this coin's very interesting. This is again a totally unpublished coin, unpublished and unique. And in my opinion, if we look here, you have the figure of Christ on the side here, crowning the emperor. I think it's pretty much the finest depiction known of Christ portraiture-wise. To have this clean of a strike, this well engraved of a portrait. I mean, even in despite of the damaged flan, this really is a wonderful coin. Great style. And this was one Adrian mentioned earlier, kind of cleaning coins, where this was again a group lot find, sort of just with a bunch of bronze coins. It would appear that the person who was selling them didn't even realize it was silver. But to take this then and actually, all I did was get a toothbrush and soak it in distilled water, but it cleaned up quite nicely and revealed a lot of details that weren't there before. But it's a very interesting piece, an interesting coin. Um, yeah, both numismatically and then also historically for just the figure who's associated and all the deeds he did. But I think that'll be one of the highlights of the sale for sure. And then this is also very interesting. This is a unpublished bronze type. So you probably noticed so far, I mean, a lot of the unpublished types I've shown, they're almost exclusively silver. And there seems to be a good reason for that, in that the mintage of silver coins is often very small, from what we can tell. It's unclear if these were minted on a wide scale, recalled, melted down, and then reminted with the next year's following type. Um, but for whatever reason, a lot of the silver coins don't exist. So it's very likely that when you own a silver piece, it's going to be perhaps one of a handful known and or unique. But bronze is typically minted on a wider scale, so it is kind of interesting to find an unpublished bronze. Like I mentioned with the John Dukas, that was very interesting, the unpublished coin. And here's another one of Michael. And this one is also very interesting just for the details. We have St. Demetrius here on the obverse holding a cross, and the emperor on the reverse, with pretty much full legends, also wearing the chlamys, or the correct pronunciation, I'm not exactly sure, but a very interesting piece of regalia here. We can kind of see the hash mark embroidery that would indicate a heavily bejeweled piece of clothing. But yeah, it's a very interesting coin. And then also kind of funny, I was able to pick up a second known example of this. And as we can see here, this example was actually clipped and cut down, but it is the same coin type that we see here in the two different pieces. And that kind of goes to show perhaps the variety of quality in late Byzantine coins, and that a lot of times, while it might seem that some of the pieces are very awful, this is kind of the wide spectrum of what you can find, between maybe one high end of a very nice piece and the low end of a rather poor piece, but again, unpublished and very rare, so still interesting. And then going through here, these are always some fun types that I think people tend to enjoy. So here we've got the Emperor Michael Palaeologos actually holding up the city of Constantinople, presenting it on his throne. I think just for me, I'm kind of a sucker for the model city types. I quite like those. I think they're interesting and fun to see. So earlier we saw Thessaloniki, and now we've seen Constantinople and then model city type. And then also this is fun. Um, you kind of mentioned earlier, Kyle, the cherubic face of Michael on that one coin from Theodore, but here we actually see a cherub or a seraphim on the obverse here. Very interesting, with what appear to be about 6 or 8 sets of wings plus the head, and then 2 arms going out to either side holding up a spear. And then on the reverse, you've got the Emperor Michael seated on a throne. This is actually a decently rare type, but it's always fun to see the seraphim. And then here's the sort of interregnum piece. So we've seen Michael, and this was issued to actually commemorate his son, his coronation of his son as co-ruler in 1272. It's a very rare piece again. I think there's, if I recall correctly, I think again 5 known in private hands or so. So very rare, and you kind of see in the obverse you've got Saint George, and the reverse you've got the emperor and his son together being crowned by the archangel Michael up above in the heavens, coming down to bless their co-rulership. So it's a coin type you don't see very often, very rare. And pretty interesting, this being a coronation issue, and yeah, sort of encapsulates the Palaeologan dynastic politics very well. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, so it is the fifth specimen known, but a very rare issue. Here we can go into then his son, some of his coinage, just some of the more interesting pieces. We just go through here real quick and see. I think we're kind of time-wise, I think we've been going for about an hour, so I'm not going to take too much more time rambling here. But this is a very interesting. This is a fun hyperpyron showing the Emperor Andronicus, who is renowned for his piety. He actually introduces a very new coin type showing him in proskynesis before Christ. So we actually see the Emperor here bowing down on hands and knees before the figure of Christ, which is a fun coin type.
Just looking at all the different coins
that
you've highlighted, I mean, the number of unpublished or one-of-a-kind coins in this collection is exceptional. I would imagine that the sale itself would become a reference material for late Byzantine coins going forward.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. I think perhaps I'm missing some of the more common types per se. As in, I think sometimes I just sort of passed over maybe buying 3 or 4 common bronzes to get the one unpublished or to get the one group lot that had a unique piece. So I don't know. I'd be curious. I think at least for the unpublished, I think a lot of times a sale will probably get referenced back just to show that it's kind of the only other known occurrence of a coin like that. So we'll see. But like I mentioned too, with that reference work, I'm going to be, or I have been working on for about 1.5 years, 2 years now. I think maybe a little bit longer, maybe 2.5. But that's going to kind of incorporate a lot of the sale as well. And that was kind of the genesis of the reference work project, was actually getting all this catalog. So I think the sale is quite interesting, and perhaps the auction itself kind of becomes a reference point. But I'm hoping that ultimately the reference work will surpass what I've done here, because that's going to include not only types I've known, but all the types ever known. So hopefully that'll get some appreciation and see some use. But yeah, we'll see. I guess time will tell if the sale ages well or not.
And I would imagine most of the museum collections out there have quite a lot of gaps when it comes to late Byzantine coins, that this could potentially fill those gaps.
Certainly.
Is that something that you've seen too? I mean, I know you mentioned Dumbarton Oaks. I know that they have an extensive collection, but there's certainly things that they're missing that are in this sale.
I think especially for late Byzantine, if you go through specifically this period, I think with Dumbarton Oaks, their Palaeologan, the late Byzantine collection, is pretty much unmatched, very extensive. But their earlier Byzantine collection from 1204 to 1258, if you go through the actual reference works and catalog, a lot of times what you'll see is pretty much all of the silver types are going to be not in the collection. They'll have the piece, the number in parentheses, kind of showing that this coin was loaned for photography purposes and cataloging purposes. So I was actually kind of surprised to go to Dumbarton Oaks. The gold is pretty much unmatched. I think that's where they're pretty much king. They probably got around 100 hyperpyra of John III alone. But for their silver coins, I mean, you go in the reference work, I think they've got about 20 or 30 listed. They own about 3 at the actual institute. So I think, especially for silver, a lot of these are so rare that most museums and institutions aren't going to have any. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see kind of who comes in and who purchases a lot of these coins. And like I mentioned too, it's very unusual that some of the things I'm offering actually do have a provenance. That can be a big deal for a museum, right? A lot of them will have an institute policy that says you have to buy coins before a certain date for various reasons. But a lot of these, they were coins that were sort of well taken care of and actually had a lot of paperwork accompanying them from the original sale or whatnot. So it's perhaps in that reason also maybe attracting some institutions where an unprovenance coin might be unappealing, but those that have provenance would then be an okay buy for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really great chance to pick up coins that you're never going to get a chance to pick up again. Really, it's a tremendous sale.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thanks.
What was the driver for you to get into this? I mean, how did you sort of fall into collecting late Byzantine coins?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I guess it would have to be just kind of being like a college student with lots of time and not that much money. I feel like this was almost a very good area to enter for that. I kind of mentioned it earlier too, but I think that it's a field that really pays off if you actually take the time to learn the scholarship. And that's not just buying the books, but actually like sitting down and reading them and doing some analysis and actually trying to identify coins yourself. And once you've done that for a couple years, once you have that skill set, it's pretty easy then to actually sort of pick out and identify certain coins that are listed incorrectly, which happens quite a lot. I mean, you can imagine a lot of these coins, if we're going to be honest, like this one here, they're not going to be in the best shape per se. And so if you're not familiar with the era and you don't know your types, maybe this, which is actually an unpublished coin, unknown. If you didn't know that, you might just pass it off as a more common type. So I think part of that was for me, it sort of allowed me to maybe negate the lack of financial backing I had, as in I had time and I had the knowledge, I didn't quite have the money per se. So this was kind of the one field where I could maybe have an equal playing field, as in maybe a coin gets listed at C&G, at Triton, or at NAC, and it goes for like $5,000, $6,000. I can't really afford that, but I can go to the group lots and find some rarities that way, and I can buy them privately or whatnot. So it was kind of a way for me to just, I don't know, actually have a field where I could seriously collect in while also sort of being hampered on a limited budget. Where I think like, I don't know, if you're going to collect Roman coins, it's, I mean, you can collect the bronzes or whatnot, but I think to actually have a collection that has many unpublished important coins, coronation issues, gold, silver, bronze. I mean, if you were going to maybe equate a collection like this in Greek or Roman terms, I feel like you'd be looking at somewhere in the high six figures, if not more, which is so great about the late Byzantine coins, to where that, I mean, the value, the monetary value is not there, but the historical value certainly is. So you're able to collect and enjoy all this history at a much, much cheaper rate.
And
That makes sense.
as a Roman collector myself, I'm greatly jealous of the fact that you can go through group lots and you can find coins like this, that are not just bronze, but oftentimes also, in your case, silver, which is something that you would never be able to do with, say, a rare coin from the Republic, or something interesting from the early imperial period.
Yeah, it just makes it, I don't know, I think there's a certain appeal to that at a certain level, to where it's not about the money you have, but just the skill set, which is kind of fun. To whereas I feel like, I mean, I did collect Greek and Roman way back when, I don't know, 2015, 2020, up until around that time, alongside late Byzantine. I just kind of found though that, I mean, if you're not an extremely wealthy individual, it is very hard to actually own some interesting types unless you become extremely specialized in one certain area, like collecting, I don't know, a certain set of denarii from one mint or one emperor or bronze series.
Mm.
It's very hard to actually put together an extensive collection like that. Not impossible. Plenty of people actually do it. But I just found that I think late Byzantine, it was just the easiest way to get a tremendous amount of history and variety at a very cheap price, and then not only get the history but also getting the unpublished coin types, and I mean truly unpublished. I think like the unpublished coins listed here, it's not like um, Officina's 1 through 5 are known, and I'm listing Officina 6 now for the first time. I mean, quote unquote, that's unpublished, but the coin type is more or less known. But these are actually completely new types, obverse, reverse, and combination, that can perhaps significantly change the numismatic understanding. So I think it's also just having access to coins like that, where I think in Greek and Roman, I mean, I think honestly, I don't think that's even possible. I mean, even if you had unlimited time and an unlimited budget, could you actually go out and find completely new and unpublished Roman Republican types?
No,
I feel like
no,
you just couldn't
never.
do it.
Yeah.
It's just impossible. So,
I mean, maybe 80, or like even 100 years ago, that sort of collecting would be on the fringe. But today, the area is too well studied. Like, you're not gonna, no. Yeah. A new type within, as like, let's say, like the Republic, that's gonna be a sensation. That's gonna be something that's not in Crawford, for example. That's automatically like a 4 to 5 figure piece. So
mm.
yeah.
Yeah, that's just kind of what drew me to this, just sort of the ability to actually, I don't know, make an impact numismatically, and then also, like I said, just at a cheaper rate to be able to collect all this. And I mean, obviously, as a consigner, hopefully it doesn't go cheap, but at a certain sense, I think just it is a cheap field in comparison to where a lot of these coin types, if you kind of swapped out the coin and changed it from a 13th century Byzantine emperor unique coin to a 3rd century emperor, I mean, you would add 2 or 3 zeros to the final hammer price, and that would be it. So just, I don't know, I think it's a very fun era that sort of lets you actually have a lot of history at your fingertips and actually make a difference in the study of the field at a very cheap rate, to where then it becomes more about your capabilities as a scholar and less so about the amount of money you have. And yeah,
That's awesome, man. Really awesome.
thanks.
Amazing
Yeah,
collection. An amazing
thanks.
scholarship too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think I hope it'll go well. Um, yeah, there's not too much more now, just some more unpublished types that we can kind of go through, just unique, hitherto unknown, very interesting. And this also was kind of fun. It was actually a type to where I won the worst looking coin or the worst grade coin before I actually won this. So I would guess around like 2021, I actually won this, and it was an amazing group lot. Um, it was from, I'm not going to go too much into it, I guess, but it was a well-known collector who had listed all of his coins to an auction house. They had meticulously listed pretty much every single coin and then group lotted all the low value ones that wouldn't make single lotting. But somehow they actually had 5 or 6 unique late Byzantine coins that ended up in a single group lot. And I think the issue there was they couldn't find these coins in any of the catalogs and just assumed because if they can't find them, they must be worth nothing and group lotted them all. So for like 140 bucks, I was able to get 5 or 6 completely unpublished silver late Byzantine coins, which was a great treat for me. And that was actually kind of one of the big impetuses and drivers that actually led me into collecting this more seriously, was finding that group lot. But this was a couple years ago, and this was actually one of those coins in that lot. Um, and I found that it was a late Byzantine Tornese, and it was just sort of a little bit of a puzzle to where, with the obverse, the left hand legend was actually sort of damaged to where you couldn't read that part of the coin, and the right side was sort of scraped away, and just to the point where the coin was a little bit or almost illegible, to where you couldn't tell who the emperor was. And then a couple years later, I actually found a better example of the same type with full legends, to where I was then able to identify the coin. But kind of a fun story of going between a unique one that you can't attribute to with some patience, actually finding a second example in much better condition. But yeah, just a fun story. And then actually both of those are also published in an article I had that came out a while back. But they're interesting coins for sure. Yeah, kind of nearing the end here. This was funny too. The best coin in the whole collection. No, I'm just kidding. I think this might be a very crude coin in a very poor condition, but kind of part of why you might find a coin like this in a sale alongside a lot of the unpublished were also just kind of talking to Giuliano at NAC. It was kind of the idea of presenting the collection as like a scholarly pursuit besides just listing coins for sale. And so that's why you might see 1 or 2 of the low value coins also being put in this sale, just because it's kind of presenting the collection in its entirety put together, as opposed to dispersing the high end coins in one sale and the low end coins in a different one. I was very adamant about if I'm going to sell, I kind of want to have all my stuff in one sale in one place at one time, as opposed to certain coins get sent off to the feature, certain coins get sent off to the regular weekly sale, certain coins get put off, I don't know, in a different place. I feel like for me, for a collection, it's very appealing to have it just in one place in one time to actually get the holistic overview, as opposed to having to use 4 or 5 different auctions to actually piece together one collection. Yeah, it's a very interesting sale. This one too. Some more interesting Tornases that are. Um, this one is actually unpublished, not in the reference works. A very fun coin that, funnily enough, even though it's completely unpublished, I was actually able to find um, an example in worse condition at a C&G sale 2003. So that was kind of interesting. So it's actually the second known of this type, seemingly, but a unique Tornese. And then this one is published, but it's very rare, and I think um, perhaps the only specimen on the sales archives. That both are some fun pieces, seldom seen. Yeah, and some of the silicon coins are very interesting too. This is again one that's sort of a damaged coin, but not often seen, where you got the emperor being blessed by the mother of God, Andronicus III here, and then you've got Saint Demetrius here on the obverse. I think the photograph got kind of flipped around, but that's all right. But you've got Demetrius here. But even despite the damage, a lot of times with late Byzantine, that's kind of what you have to accept. As in, if a coin is so rare that you really can't feasibly get a different example, you just take the coin with the damage and have to appreciate it at that. And here's a wonderful example of a different type. You can see here it's Christ on the obverse, and then you got the Emperor Andronicus III being blessed by St. Demetrius on the reverse. But old collection toning, very pleasant in hand, just a spectacular piece. I think also at one point sold in the New York sale, so it's got some provenance too, but a very fun and interesting piece. And then here another rare type, but again damaged, but still interesting. Yeah, I guess one of the highlights here towards the end is going to be the offering of the politicon series of coinage. And so these are an unknown series of anonymous coins. The scholarship, we aren't quite sure why they were minted, but they all had the legend politicon, translating directly from the people or of the people. And some of them actually feature the emperor. Here's an example of this type here. We see the emperor on the left. Hold on one second. I think someone's ringing at my door. I should be right back. Ja. Ich bin gerade beschäftigt, ich bin einen Anruf und das geht. Entschuldigung. Ja, passt. Danke. Apologies. Anyway, what I was saying, this series of coinage is actually unpublished. From what you've got the two different types. Like I said, politicon. The legend that connects them all translates to the series of coinage being published or being minted of or by the people. But there's two types, two classes, some with the emperor named and shown and some without. So this type here, you see the emperor here, Andronicus III, so that's a named politicon type, and other ones just feature different designs like a castle or a cross or a set of keys. So, I mean, these are all in decently rough shape, but they're kind of hard to find, much nicer. Just a rare series of coinage that is not often seen. So yeah, it's an interesting offering for sure of sort of a key and fun type for a lot of collectors, and especially this piece here. Again, not in the best shape, but this is one of the rarest types of the politicon series with the keys. So it's just a fun offering for collectors, and anyone who's in this field will appreciate the different types being offered here.
Is the thinking here that this is some sort of civil war issue?
Perhaps. I think the theories are, I mean, this is certainly a tumultuous period in the Byzantine history where you've got a lot of, yeah, civil issues going on, civil conflicts, civil wars, usurpations, rebellions, attacks. So it's not quite sure if they were going to be, or if they were intended as payment for some sort of side on the Civil War, or perhaps some sort of civic municipal coinage, perhaps minted just for use within the city. But yeah, I haven't really seen any theory that's convinced me of what their purpose is. There's a lot of speculation, but it's just a very interesting sort of enigma, I suppose.
Very cool.
Yeah. Yeah, fun type for sure. And then these are also interesting. You don't see them too often. Some rare bronze coins of the very late empire. So, I mean, this is going to be roughly about 25 years to about 35 years before the fall of Constantinople. And so what's very well known are the Stavraton coins. These are the silver pieces that I'm sure you all have seen. I don't have a Constantine the 11th. Sadly, I couldn't find one of those, misidentified. I guess people care enough to check. But I do have a John the 8th. So the silver coins are very well known and very common, but the bronzes are actually very hard to find. And so, I mean, this is in rough shape. You can see here on the one side, you've got an M for Manuel, and the ruler standing here holding a scepter, and on the reverse, you've got Christ. But just an interesting offering of a coin series you don't see very often. Yeah. And then more here of, that was Manuel. This is his successor and son, John. Just a similar thing. Of course, as the empire goes along, the coins get even more crude, if that's possible. But here we can see again a similar coin design type and an offering of rare bronzes that don't usually come to market. Here's a highlight too. This is the last silver trachea minted in Trebizond. So I haven't collected Trebizond too much, and partly that's in fact just because the coins are so rare. Um, I think it would be very, very difficult to actually collect at least the bronze side. What's very common and seen often is the asper. This is the flat silver coin from Trebizond, adopted to match what would seem to be the Italian style of the day of a flat coin. And even though the Byzantines actually followed suit, or they followed suit later, but it was actually Trebizond who were the first to transition from sort of the classic Byzantine medieval scyphate AR coin into the more traditional medieval flat silver coins. And so this is actually very interesting in that it's the final AR trachea from Trebizond, from Manuel, that at some point in his reign he transitions from these silver scyphate trachees into the flat round aspers. And I actually published an article doing a die study on these a while back, but it's just a very interesting coin, a very interesting piece, and also again seldom seen. The asper, on the other hand, this is very common, pretty easy to find, but the actual trachea itself, that's a difficult piece to acquire. And then here's another fun one, like I kind of mentioned, the scarcity of bronze issues from Trebizond. Here's one I picked up. It's actually unpublished in Seer, published in Ratowski and Bendel. But Bendel, his only inclination of this series existing was actually from the earlier work of Ratowski. And Ratowski was published in the, I want to say it was the late 1880s, or I think it was maybe 1906. I have to check the exact date. But he actually had line drawings for all those coins and not plates. So some of those coins featured in that collection, I think it was from the Russian Imperial collection, but some of the types presented, we don't know if they exist. All we have is a line drawing, and an actual specimen was never able to be found to actually compare to prove the existence of it. So this is one of those coin types to where it was in Ratowski as a line drawing. When Bendel made his book, he actually didn't know of any examples existing. And so this is actually the first, from what I can tell, photographed and documented example that we have since those line drawings of this type actually existing. I guess the worry there is you have a work in the 1900s that has line drawings. Perhaps the author made a mistake or whatnot without the photographs or the source of the coin to actually back that up if it no longer exists. But this is very interesting to actually have then the specimen that confirms this type's existence. And then, yeah, we're pretty much closing out the sale here. Kind of going from Trebizond now into some of the sort of quasi-Byzantine Bulgarian issues that are debatable if they're really truly Byzantine or not, but they're Byzantine in style, and I think a lot of the collectors also stick in these or collect in these areas as well. This is kind of a fun one, a mysterious issue with two rulers on it, proposed by Bendal to be the Asen twins, or the brothers here. I'm not quite sure if I necessarily agree with the attribution per se. It's kind of, without legends, very difficult to say who they might be, but it's a very fun type, a very interesting issue, and popular with collectors. Decently rare, hard to find, but not extremely so. And also, this is a great type I like, where you have the Bulgarian emperor here riding on horseback with his cloak, his cape billowing in the wind. It's quite fun. But yeah, that'll pretty much do it. So, as you guys can see from the start to the end, kind of go over the Latin Empire into Nicaea, looking at their different rulers, then transition to Thessaloniki, their emperors and despots, then into the Palaeologan Empire, and then with the Palaeologans, Byzantium falls, and then sort of some of the side empires here, Trebizond, the Bulgarians, and yeah, with those 145 lots, that's pretty much the collection there. hopefully an interesting look, an interesting snapshot in these 2 centuries of Byzantine coinage that, yeah, covers a disparate group, but interesting group of various peoples and various times.
Well, thank you so much, Sam, for the walkthrough here. I mean, nothing short of amazing that you've been able to do this on your own and at this early in your career. So I mean, it's immensely impressive.
Thank you, thank you.
And I guess also shout outs are in order to NAC for being not just this enthusiastic and open to hosting the sale, but also letting you catalog your own coins.
Yeah, they
Really,
were very
really,
great.
really cool to
Gotta
see.
acknowledge a thank you here to them as well. I think Giuliano in particular was very enthusiastic about it. Actually flew out to my house to see the coins in the collection. I think he's a big supporter. I think he just kind of likes to see this sort of just something different, numismatically speaking, kind of a different kind of collection that's not Greek or Roman. And so yeah, he was a big proponent of it, a big fan. So I'm very thankful for him and his support. And yeah, it was
So you,
a solid
so
experience. It'll be
you,
sold October 1st. Um, yeah, I mean, like I said, a little bit of delays that were somewhat annoying, but besides that, I really have nothing but the best to say about them. I think they were very supportive, very friendly, and then also helped work through the whole thing. And yeah, very kind of them to actually agree to my terms, let me catalog this myself.
I was gonna say it's a unique collection that's a differentiator for the auction house. I mean, it's not something you're gonna find anyplace else at any other auction house. And it's
It
great
was
that he allowed
interesting
you to.
though. I mean, we kind of discussed this a little bit when Antoine, Adrian, and I talked about the consignment process. But I did find certain auction houses were less willing to actually sort of present a collection like this in its entirety compared to others. Certain ones were very adamant that only their catalogers can catalog coins and that the consignor can't handle it, and rules of that nature. So, yeah, I am very thankful to the NAC that they were willing to let me do all this.
Well, to your point, you see it a lot. Collections getting split up between e-sales and feature sales depending on the type of coin that they are, and it kind of takes something away from the overall collection, in my opinion.
Hmm.
So great that they kept it together, and like I said, I would not be surprised that if this sale is the reference work in the years to come.
And of course, the big question is where to go from here. I think on that, I'm still undecided. I'm not entirely sure what I'll do after this. I think I'll be active in the late Byzantine field, academically at least, without question. But we'll see with what I collect next. I'm not quite sold. I think it'll be Byzantine for sure, but maybe I wander out a little bit and yeah, we'll see.
Well, I have to drop. Thanks for allowing me to be a part of this, and
Yeah, thank you for
I'm
coming
sure
on.
this
It's much
is going to
appreciated.
be great. Yes, man. Awesome
Yeah, I think we
coins.
can just call it there, but yeah. Adrian, also thank you for coming on, and I hope you guys have a nice day. And make sure to like, subscribe, and comment what you think the most interesting coin of this sale is.